Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Temelkov.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and dear audience. Today we have the privilege to welcome a guest that I've known for many years. It took us a year to schedule this interview today, so appreciate really of making the time and being with us. But as you know, we are on a mission to bring together some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world. And today we have Oliver Iltisberger, who is one of those leaders, and he's part of the CEO series, who is actually going through such a rich experience, going from private equity-backed turnarounds to publicly listing organizations, to turnarounds, to working for large multi-billion organizations across the world and living in different countries and running global businesses. So Oliver, welcome, and thank you for making the time after taking us such a long time to be together.
Well, thank you very much, Marian, for the flexibility. I know we had to move this quite a few times, but I'm so excited to join the podcast today. I've watched a few of the podcasts that you've done over the last year or so, and it's inspiring, to be honest. So I'm very glad to be here today.
Thank you, Oliver. I mean, there's so many, of course, interesting questions, and our audience vary from leaders like yourself to the future leaders, and that's something we're deeply passionate about. And if you start is there when you started out, were you thinking that you will be a CEO? How people often asking the question: is it by chance? Is it by conviction? How did your journey took place in order to be here today?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a difficult question to answer, to be honest, because when I started my career, yes, I mean, did I have a view that I could lead maybe an organization sometimes much later in my career? Probably to an extent, yes, because I come from a family that was entrepreneurial. My father had an entrepreneurial business that he ran. So I learned a little bit about, what that means in terms of taking that kind of responsibility. But then, of course, it's a long, long, long way from knowing it theoretically in terms of, what you could do to then make it happen. So I would say, yes, I had it in the back of my mind, but certainly I had no idea when I started my first job how I would get there, and certainly no plan in terms of, what the steps would be in terms of making those movements. So the answer is principle knowledge, yes, but no way to know how to get there in detail and what the steps would be.
You had the desire, but wasn't obviously clear of how you're going to get there, how long you're going to be, or what exactly you're going to end up at the end, and you didn't know the steps. So if we talk about those ingredients, Oliver, what are those really important areas that leaders that may not be at this level, may not be a CEO, or even future leaders should consider?
Look, I mean, I think there's always a lot of things that need to come together, Marian. I think the one is, of course, you need to have the ambition to be wanting a leader of a team, a leader of a project, the leader of a business. So to some extent, you have to have that ambition to say you want to lead something. It doesn't have to be a large organization, right? But it can be a project, it can be an initiative, it can be some collaboration across different parts of an organization or even across different companies. But just sometimes something that sort of stands out, that makes you drive, let's say, something that's unique that only you can do as a leader in that sense. So the ambition needs to be certainly there to wanting to do that. And that, I would say, is the very first step. If you don't, without that, it's probably a bit more difficult.
Someone said to me that in order to be a successful leader, you need to lead, as you say, or try, whether it's people, project, something early on in your 20s. Was that the case with you? Did you lead something in your 20s?
Yes, I actually did. Maybe I'll tell the story in terms of, I joined, my first company was actually working for Siemens.
Oh, wow.
And I joined there back then, their international trainee program, which is like a 2-year program, and you run like 8
really
months.
Good one.
Exactly, it's a great program. It still exists today. It's, I think, even called the same way, and it's a great program because you are like supposed to work for 8 months in different projects with others to learn, right? But what happened in my case is I was like really, really fortunate to have an exceptional coach and leader in that program who basically threw me into the cold water from day one and said, look, I mean, you can work on this project with others and you can learn, but you can also decide on your own whether you want to take more initiative in this project, whether you want to actually lead and drive something there at a very early age. I was 26 or so at that time. And I was working with people, a lot older, a lot more experienced, etc. So that was like being thrown in the cold water. And I went from a small project that I did in the factory to a bigger project with a consultant afterwards. And then I had a great opportunity to go to, my first international experience to go to Singapore. Wow. And I was supposed to actually, go there as a technical expert for sensors to support the team there with technical support and backup. And then on the day when I arrived, Marian, sometimes those lucky things happen in your life. The person who's responsible for sales of that product resigned in that region. And guess what? They said, well, we don't have anyone that knows that product. So why don't you go ahead and you try and actually not do technical support, but you try and do sales for this product in Southeast Asia. And that was sort of, I would say that was one of the early moments in my career, because you asked for that, how did you get that into that, where I had a great opportunity to step up to a role that I would have normally have done many years later, only running sales in a foreign territory. But I had to jump into it. And it was a fantastic opportunity and a great learning experience. So that's how I got into this, I would say, early on leadership at very young age.
So two things here that are important for future leaders. And one of them is, yes, make sure you do have a vision and want to lead something, make a difference, but also get ready and prepare for this as much as you can, and get a great coach. That's what you're saying, because you had really an opportunity of somebody to kind of mentor you, or mentor or coach, somebody who can actually share best practices and help you out on that journey.
Yeah, I would say those two, yes, and then the third one is luck. And one of my favorite saying words is, luck is a legitimate management tool. And you just sometimes need to be at the right time, at the right position. That's one thing. But then, of course, you also need to realize that you are at that intersection.
You know what I call this? I call the blessing. The blessing is when resources, people, and wealth is organizing in a way that works in your favor. So it's like it's just absolutely. But what I also believe is that it's not just the luck itself. You prepare for it. I think it's because if that happens and you're not prepared, like if you're not in Singapore and have not put the time and invested into that product and getting to know, you have very little chance of succeeding and even getting the job in first place. So I think, the element, as you said, of how you attract, the question is, how do you attract that luck, so to say, or that blessing, if you like, is by preparing. And what about personality and character? What role does that play, do you think, in really rising and growing in your career?
I mean, I would say it's a key ingredient, right? I mean, the personality and character is one way of describing it. But what comes with that is typically, I would say, a set of values that you have for yourself, a set of principles that you have for yourself. I would call them, today I call them management principles and values. Back then, were just probably more beliefs in terms of what I think is important. and that you stand for them, and that you basically use them a bit of as a personal compass in giving you direction in terms of what is right and what is wrong, and what is sort of the direction that you want to take. So that's maybe a bit of a different word of other than personality or character, because for me this is something that you also shape over your career.
Yes.
I mean, have I had all the knowledge on let's say what kind of values and beliefs and principles I want to use back then? No, I didn't. But I had probably some of that in terms of just beliefs and in terms of directions, and like, for example, having the courage to take certain decisions, to jump into the cold water and to take on a project that no one wants to take. Yeah, that's something I probably did at that time, and it's something that gave me then later on in my career the confidence that it can be done. You can do that. Yes, it has a bit of risk. Yes, you can maybe fail with that as well, but the reward is tremendous if you succeed, and if you have experienced that, that's a great. It gives you a great feeling.
Oliver, I love that. Just share what you mentioned already. Courage is one of those management principles. Share what other management principles or beliefs, values, set of values that are really fundamental. I'm sure there's not one or two, but they kind of a composition. But what are the cornerstones for you that really you refer to when you make decisions?
Yeah, no, that's I'm very passionate actually to talk about that. In fact, I just talked about it to the new leadership team that I joined the last couple of days. We had our first leadership meeting, and as you should do in those kind of meetings, you say, what are your beliefs, what are your values?
I would love to hear about your organization, because you just started a new role, and congratulations. So I would love to hear that. But yeah, please.
We'll come to that later. Yeah, but I mean, in terms of the leadership principles and the values, I would say I have a set of them, 5 or 6, that are really important for me. The one you already mentioned is the one that I usually mentioned last, but it's last and very important. It's the one that's called managerial courage, and we just talked about that. So that is certainly one that is very close to my heart. But before that, of course, there's other things, and those other things are trust and collaboration, which I find very important. I mean, clearly, when you move into the leadership position, you realize very quickly that you cannot succeed alone as a person individually. You have to have a strong team, and that team needs to have trust in you, needs to have trust in each other, and it needs to collaborate. Because what usually happens when you become a leader of a team, in most cases, at least I can talk for myself, you're probably the least qualified person when it comes to the different let's say experts that you have in your management team, whether they run sales or operations or run a business unit for specific products. Then they will have more knowledge and more experience, and I see my role much more than in terms of how can you bring such a team together to get to a maximum output. And trust and collaboration is very, very important in order to make that work, so that the team actually really rows into the same direction for success.
That's very difficult. How do you build that trust? Let's talk about the behaviors that you look for in that moment, because it goes the same in people's lives. I mean, if you have people that you can trust, you've done really well as in life, that you can count on people. So how do you quickly, because in a managerial setup, it's especially when you step into or enter an organization and that's not in place, how does that change? What are the behaviors you look for, and how you influence them, basically?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question, Marian, and it's an important one, because the trust part is difficult. And I can tell you, probably at the early time of my career, I was struggling with that a lot more, in a sense, in terms of trusting enough in capabilities of your peers, of your team members, even your superiors, because trust also comes with some risks. You give trust to someone, and you don't know whether that person is going to actually use that trust in a way or misuse that trust, etc. And you will have probably all of us would have had situations where we trusted someone, and then that trust wasn't given back, and maybe it was misused and you were disappointed afterwards. And then it's very hard to say, oh, wow, I mean, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore in the future because it can hurt. So that was probably at the early stages of my career, more my thinking, to be honest. And it had pros and cons. I probably got less disappointed, but I also got less out of personal relationships because the trust wasn't maybe as strong as it could be. And then at some time, in my career, I changed around the paradigm and I said, well, what is if you by default trust your peers, your colleagues, your employees, your customers, your suppliers, you give them the full trust. And you show them that you give them the full trust, right? You demonstrate that with your actions, with your behaviors, with your listening skills, etc. And you see how they react. And I mean, my experience with that, Marian, is fantastic. I mean, you will see the majority of people in business environments and also in private lives. I mean, they want to do the right thing. They want to do the good thing as well. They want to have a good, relationships at work, etc. So they will pay you back big time if you show them trust, and they will give you trust back. And the relationships that you build with employees, with peers, with all sorts of stakeholders will be a lot better. And it outweighs by 100 times maybe the one or two negative experiences that I was talking about before. So that's sort of my definition of trust. I think you have to give it in advance, not knowing that there will necessarily be how it will necessarily be taken up, and the advantage is humongous if you do it right.
Oh, thank you. That is such a great to see that you were there and you've transformed, because there are many leaders and that are going through their own really growth and questioning a lot of that. And of course, fear and pain is a big factor, right? And when you have one or two, you tend to remember more one or two. But you're absolutely right. Giving people the trust up front. Yeah, you may have some people that will take advantage, but they can only take advantage once because you will figure them out, and then they'll be found out afterwards.
And as I said, Marian, I mean, you have 1 out of 10 that takes advantage, and you have 9 relationships that you build much stronger and much better than you would have ever done otherwise. So the positives outweigh the potential negative by factor 10.
And that's very much closely linked to care, which we're going to talk about overall, the trust. What are the other principles?
I think, clearly customer focus and people focus is very important to me. I think in the end, every organization, at least every corporate organization in business, succeeds with the customer in mind first. And I usually put customer focus and people focus in the same bucket because almost everyone in the company is a customer of another department of the company.
I was going to say which one you put first, and I was just listening to you because it's a very interesting one here.
Yeah. For me, it's the customer, and the customer is then the final end customer. But then, of course, you have lots of customers in the company, and if everyone treats their peer as a customer in a positive sense, then that goes a long way. So that's very important for me. Transparency and integrity. It goes in hand with what I said before on collaboration, right, and trust. But integrity and transparency is really important. People know me as a what I would say is being a straight shooter. That means I say the things the way I think they are. I put them on the table, whether it's positive or not so positive sometimes.
I have one quick observation here, and obviously I live in the UK, and the UK is fantastic, just amazing, really, in many ways. But at the same time, sometimes we at school and generally we teach the children we may go to that extreme sometimes of teaching them to be polite, but not to be honest with their feelings or how. So the trick here is, how can you be polite and take care, which is fantastic because you take care of the emotions of the other person. But the problem is that you're not honest to you, and that creates later on a problem for you personally. So it's just that fine balance of how can you be honest. That's care, our honesty, but without necessarily hurting the people on the other side.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you actually there's actually two questions that I see in what you're saying, because the first one I would point out when you say going to school in the UK, etc., and what pupils learn to be polite. It's there's a lot of cultural differences in terms of how people actually interact in business, and you will find cultures that are more direct. And maybe more in between the eyes, and I would say where I
Netherlands, so that
I
is
grew up in Germany, so that's probably quite a common scene there. Whilst maybe in the UK, you learn how to more balanced, give more balanced feedback, a bit more. You have to read in between the lines, etc., to understand that. And I'm not judging. It's not the one is better than the other. It's like just to be aware of the fact that is an intercultural difference. And you get many other cultures with again different ways of how that's being given. So I think that's an important part. And the other thing is, I don't know. I mean, even if you have to give someone a not so positive feedback, let's say on performance, on behavior, etc., I feel that's also caring, because ultimately, you want to help that person to excel, to be more, more successful, to be more liked by their colleagues, to have a better relationship with peers or with customers, whatever it is that person maybe needs in terms of coaching. So I would say it's a great principle of care. If you be direct with your peers and with your teammates and employees, and you give them that feedback, because they will be able to take it on board, they can learn from it, and they can hopefully, if they like, take it on board and improve.
Absolutely. To be honest, for me, if I have to make a choice, even if sometimes it's not delivered in the most, let's say, pleasant way, sometimes it's not always possible, but you can deliver even the truth is above all for me. The truth gives you the backbone and the core of people and who they are, because you don't live in a fake world. You just face the challenges as they are, and then you have a chance to grow. And I think, but that becomes with self-awareness, and that's a great really principle you aspire to. So have trust and collaboration, customer focus and people focus, which is fantastic that you put them on the same level. Transparency and integrity. Courage. Is there one more that you wanted to mention, or these are the main principles you aspire to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, these were probably more values.
Values, okay.
There's also one or more, let's say, principles in leadership styles, I would say.
Yes.
The one thing that I find is important is, especially now, also when we talk about the next generations, is how approachable are you? How hierarchical are you in your style? Are you hands-on? Are you listening? I mean, those are, I would say, leadership styles where I'm saying it's very important these days to be, non-hierarchical, to be easily approachable, to just don't take yourself too serious in your role. Don't be too status conscious. Because clearly, especially the next generation of leaders and employees coming up, they don't really look up to that as great values, and they will not necessarily feel very comfortable in a culture where hierarchy is still the dominant sort of the flow of decision making and empowerment, and if you're in a leadership position, you have this great luxury that you can set the tone, right? And if you as a leader set the principle and you give the example about that, then the people, in your team will follow, and you will just change part of the culture of your company.
That's what I'm so passionate about. So in a way, our role is to, often we're so passionate about taking care of leaders, because they can spread and set the tone. And we also have a comment here from Marie, and thank you for sharing this. I confirm, as a part of the France executive team, our group CEO, trust gives us an amazing energy. So it is it starts with trust. It's really, these are traits that are common of caring and successful leadership. So thank you, Marie, for making that, also sharing that as well. And you talk about the approachability. We're all humans, and what you're saying is, don't forget that you were human before that, and you just have a role, a title. So you get the respect, you get the visibility because of the title you have and the responsibility you carry. But after all, we are humans, and if you take care of each other, and on that point about approachability and leadership style, do you see care as a weakness in leadership, and how do you perceive care? Because sometimes when you talk to leaders, they say leaders who care or leading with care, they think like, oh, this is some sort of a feminine, or this more weak, or not for us, shareholder. Do you think that?
No, I mean definitely not. I mean, I probably wouldn't have joined your podcast even today if I was thinking that, because I do believe that care is a very, very important element in leadership. I think it's also important to define. Everyone needs to define for him or herself what care means, right?
Yes.
Because it can also be misunderstood. I mean, of course, I'll give you an example. I mean, if you work in a business environment and maybe you have a difficult year in your business, and the financials aren't looking good, and you need to do actually some turnaround actions in that part of the business to get it back on track. That means you will likely, if you are the leader of this business, have to take some tough decisions in making that turnaround work. And those tough decisions can also impact employees, can also impact people. So now, is the conclusion that means that you're not caring? No, it's not, from my perspective, because there's several elements that come with that. A, you care for the company and overall for all the employees in the company that want to have a good future with that business. So you, as a leader, need to make sure that is continuously going to happen, even if there is parts of the company that are currently need to be, improved. And even if even for those people that are maybe impacted by such a, let's say, a turnaround situation, it very much comes down to how you deal with that situation. And there is many different ways of dealing with a situation where you have to take tough decisions. You can do it with compassion, and you can do it with respect, and you can do it with good communication and all of that around. And that's an element of care that comes with that as well. So for me, a bit of a longer answer to your question, Marian, but I think care is fundamental in everything you do, whether it's on a good weather at a good weather captain on a ship that's running smooth, or even if you have some headwinds and you need to maybe do some turnarounds, etc. Care is always important, and it's not a weakness from my perspective.
Fantastic. And I honestly believe care is no boundaries. It's not feminine, masculine. It's not, it rises above religions. It rises above nations. I think it's just everyone responds when you sincerely care about the person and sincerely interested in what they're doing and how we could collectively make a difference. So thank you for sharing. And even if I look back from tribal, and of course, man and masculine, like, really masculinity, if we talk about this, I mean, from tribal times, we were on guard in the evening to protect the tribe from danger. So of course that is care. They were going hunting for the food, that you could die on that, fight with an animal, whatever that may be. So really, I think care is expressed in a different way. That's what is key here, and just make sure that, of course, you take other people's view and understand them first to be understood, I guess, because it's all about being able to communicate and understand each other very well, so it can make an impact. And thank you for bringing this up. You talked about difficult moments. You talked about really that can be care can still be central to those moments. What is the most difficult challenge or moment in your career to date, Oliver? What is being really a very tough moment, and was care put to the test, or what was really the the kind of challenge you faced?
I would say, if I look back, it's usually probably, you have in your career, you go through several stages, and you will always face then some big challenges at some point in time. But I feel the first real big challenge that you face is the one that sticks in your head most. Maybe there were even bigger challenges afterwards, but the first one is the one that sticks in your head most because you had to do it for the first time, and you maybe were unprepared for it because you didn't have the knowledge. So I would say, when I was working for Landis+Gyr, it's a global smart metering company. It's market leader, in fact, for global smart metering, electricity and gas. Was private equity owned and quite heavily leveraged, I think around 2008, 2009, when the financial crisis hit.
Oh.
There was an exit plan that would have happened 1 or 2 years later. So there was the company was on track to do that, but it was tough because suddenly, the financial situation around the company wasn't as bright in that time as it should have been. And as a result of that, we had to cut back quite significantly. And I was running a large part of the Europe, Middle East, Africa organization in that business. And we had to take a very fast decision because there was no time. So if you ask me tough, that was tough because we had to do a fast turnaround at that time. And we didn't have probably enough preparation time to think through all the consequences and what it means, etc. And maybe not even enough time to set up a proper communication plan to some extent. Which had also quite negative circumstances afterwards that carried on for another 1 or 2 years in terms of the motivation was impacted from them. Maybe some wrong decisions were taken because we had to take them too fast. So I learned a huge amount of that. All the things that later on when I had similar situations. That I could take on board and say, look, what would I do different, or what have I done different compared to that very first time when I had to do that with no preparation, not having necessarily the right skills, experience to do it, under time pressure, and how would I do that differently later on? So that would be one example, Marian. What's the most important thing? Not that you make a mistake. That happens. All of us do. But the important thing is that you learn all of that. And that the next time, when a similar situation comes up, you try and do a better job in learning from the past.
Thank you so much, Oliver. I mean, that's really helpful because right now there's a lot of uncertainty with war, with gas prices. The business leaders under a lot of pressure. I mean, they just need to plan and business owners, etc. And they may need to act so fast. What are maybe 2 or 3 highlights or lessons that you may give to them if they're facing a similar situation today?
Yeah, I mean, you're already saying it, right? I mean, the fast reaction, the speed and the agility that you need to bring into those kind of situations is super critical. And I'm just seeing it also with the business now that I've just joined. With those, take the energy price increases that we see, right? You basically sit there on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and you look at the cost of electricity and the cost of gas and the cost of oil going up to an incredible amount. And then of course you scratch your head and you say, should you hedge this now? Should you hedge next week? Certain parts? Should you increase your prices to your customers immediately or not? And time is at the essence because, and we see that right now when you look in the market and you look at the newspapers, right? There's the first companies that go bankrupt out there in the market because they are suffering from the side effects of the energy crisis that's currently happening across Europe specifically. And that means you have to react very fast, and you have to react sometimes on the basis of incomplete information. So when we said in the past, you have to take a decision with 80-20, I sometimes feel we're now getting to 70-30, 60-40 in terms of decision making, because we don't have the luxury and there's not enough transparency and information out there to really help you to come to a better judgment. So my answer is, again, probably managerial courage. Not taking the decision will usually be much worse than taking a decision. And when you take a decision, to take the courage to do it with partially incomplete information. Of course, try to gather as much as you can, but take it if you have to take it.
Great. No, thank you so much. It's I'm sure a lot of great things are coming. As they say, never miss out on a big crisis. There's a lot of things you could change, because crises are moments to move status quo, to change things that you will not change, because if you're in a crisis, then something didn't work out. So I see a lot of that in sustainability. And even though it's a short term is a big trouble and problem, of course, we could look into it as an opportunity to become less dependable and more sustainable. And that's my actually next question is, what sets your heart on fire these days, Oliver? You've joined a new organization. What attracted you first, and what excites you?
Yeah, look, I mean, so I was very fortunate in my career, Marian, because even for my very first job that I described before in Siemens, I worked with digital products like sensors. Today you call them IoT sensors. And so I had that sort of digital background in my DNA from my very first job. And then when I moved on to my next companies, there was an element of sustainability that was very much coming to the agenda too. And then, of course, as we all know, and we've had many speakers also on the podcast, it's a beautiful combination. Sustainability and digitalization, or IoT, goes so much hand in hand, because I'm such a strong believer that a lot of the sustainability improvements, CO2 improvements, etc., can actually be supported by technology, and not just by behavioral change. Behavioral change is great, but we all know from our own lives that it's much more difficult to implement. But if you can support behavioral change with giving the right tools and putting the right tools in place with technology and digitalization, then of course it becomes a much more sustainable way of improving. So to give you the answer, I really, after that, moved only to companies, and I only worked for companies that had a strong sustainability agenda. And in the last two with Landis+Gyr, and then later on with ABB, it was very much about energy efficiency and CO2 reduction through the use of smart grids, smart metering, smart building technologies that would really allow to reduce the footprint on CO2, especially through the better utilization of energy than what would otherwise be the case. And what triggered me to do the change to Schoeller Allibert, where I just joined last week, is that it's actually, it's a fantastic company from a perspective that the CO2 footprint reduction that comes with returnable plastic packaging that can be recycled and reused over a period of 10 to 15 years is fantastic.
10 to 15 years.
There's a second, I'll come to that. There's a second element to it as well, which is the whole element of circular economy, which I've not had in, so much in my, let's say, focus in my previous jobs, but it's the core of the business that we're doing in Schoeller Allibert, because obviously we're trying to reuse those products over and over again, not just for ourselves, but for our customers over many years, sometimes decades. And that, of course, is a fantastic way of driving circular economy and reducing your CO2 footprint at the same time.
So this sounds really fantastic. And we talk a lot about packaging, and especially from consumer point of view. And I know your customers are more business customers as such, but is it like when Unilever, when all the retailers, supermarkets are trying to get the carbon footprint with less packaging. Is it similar what you're trying to do for your B2B customers, for companies? Is that with everything you do, with the returnable packaging, with the products you provide?
Yeah, I mean, the customers you just mentioned are potential customers that we have. Some of them are real customers that we have. Some are potential customers. So they are, and they're all looking for improving their ecological footprint. Each of these customers is looking for that. And what you look at when you look at logistics and when you look at packaging today, you get a lot of unsustainable packaging that's being used. I give you an example. I mean, look at all of the retail, the online retail, etc. It goes in card boxes, as an example, and these card boxes get thrown away. I mean, it has a high CO2 footprint to manufacture card boxes, and then they're being used only once, and then they're being thrown away, as an example, right? And for larger industrial applications, you get a lot of those steel boxes, and steel is really difficult to make. It has not a very good footprint from that perspective. And you even get wooden boxes. And again, I don't need to talk about, that wooden boxes is also not so sustainable from that perspective. And they all can't be used over such a long period of time. And that's why I was intrigued by the model to actually replace all of these alternative ways of packaging, the single-use packaging, and even the multi-use packaging with non-sustainable material, with plastic packaging that can be reused over a period of 10 to 15 years, over and over again. And at the end of that cycle, it can get grinded, recycled, and then reused again in our own products to go back to the customers. So basically, it's a perfect circular economy product because it can stay circular throughout its entire lifetime and the next lifetime as well. And that I find is an opportunity for many of our customers. And we're just tapping into that. We're scratching the surface of the opportunity at the moment.
Fantastic. Well, I thank you for sharing this. First of all, that is really great, and the mission, the vision is so powerful. There's so much potential. Really, I'm sure many of our audience and probably were not so aware of what exactly Schoeller Allibert is doing, but it's just it needs to really share more and grow more, because that makes such a big difference. We need it, urgently, as a society, as really a community. And well, one final question is, what do you think we can do more to spread the care culture? What are the things that we as really individuals can do to contribute to a more caring, more brighter future?
I think each of us has a great opportunity to do that by being an example. I would say it's one area, but I would also urge us to really make use of, let's say, all of the HR tools that we can find to really transform and change the culture in companies, not just this company, all companies, in order to make care a much more fundamental pillar of what we want to see in the company. And it starts with things like it starts with recruitment. What kind of new people you bring into your organization? What are the selection processes that you apply in terms of what's important for getting that candidate in? And usually when you recruit, or in the past when we recruited, of course, the first thing you look at their technical skills, their functional skills. Have they done the job in a similar industry or with similar complexity? And that ticks 80% of the boxes. Then you have a few descriptions about personality traits, and they say, are they good communicators, and can they have they proven that they can work in a team, and so on. And then you get another 20%. But are we really checking on the element of care? Are we asking the kind of questions that you're asking during your podcasts in those interview situations? And are we listening to the examples that the candidates are giving back, and whether they have incorporated that kind of thinking into their mentality? Probably not always. And that's where we can make a big difference, not just in the recruitment stage, but of course also in the performance reviews, in the way we set the tone, etc. And and then you spread the message. When you have more and more caring leaders in an organization, you grow more caring leaders and you attract more caring leaders.
And it works, because I've seen it carrying for others. And you've said what a great question, of starting with your people, starting with when it comes also to recruitment external, whether it's internal or external recruitment, it goes both ways, because you need to take care of the people internally. But as you said, understanding people, what sets their heart on fire, what's important to them, and seeing whether that aligns with the vision of the company, of where you want to get, and setting this out, because you're on a mission. You're not just a business at Schoeller Allibert. You're here to make a tangible differences to the carbon footprint through everything you do. So it's no longer just having a 9-to-5 job and having, you really here to make, and that means a lot of focus, performance. You're not just here to so care is important, to have a on one end, high expectations, of course, are always there, but high support. That's what I think. In order to get the goals and what's achieved and at the highest level, you also need to understand people, and high support is expressed through the way you care about them.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Fully agree, Marian, with what you said.
Well, Oliver, thank you so much for making the time. There's so many insights and valuable insights that you've shared today, and really wish you good luck, as we say, bon courage and pleasant journey in your new role. Very excited about Schoeller Allibert and what the company is doing. How people and leaders may want to, if they want to get in touch, what's the best way to reach out to you if they have any questions or?
Yeah, I mean, the best way is always to find me on LinkedIn. I have a profile there. I get quite often contacted via LinkedIn. That's the best way of doing it, because then I can reply in my own time, etc. And I do actually use that profile quite frequently. So anyone who has questions about myself, or about Schoeller Allibert, or any of the opportunities, or just wants to brainstorm about topics as well, would be very happy to get connected with that. And Marian, and thank you so much for opening up this platform. I really like the podcast series that you have. There's always really interesting people on the podcast. You learn from anyone. There's always something different that you learn, always something new. And again, that's also so important, right? In terms of your own personal development, to just listen what others have done, what their experiences were. Where have they succeeded? Where have they failed as well? And I think that's a great format that you have chosen there. Thank you very much for inviting me to it.
Thank you, Oliver. It's been a pleasure. After all, we all humans, and if we can learn from each other, and that's part of the reason for the podcast, to share those valuable insights, but not just share them, but share them from leaders who care, because how you rise matter. And that's my message to the audience out there. Just listen to especially the CEO series. You find a lot of great insights. Oliver, thank you so much once again, and good luck, and God bless with everything you do.
Thank you, Marian. All the best. Thank you.